Okay.
Okay, we're now live on YouTube. We can begin the meeting.
Right. Well, good morning, everybody. Do we have any apologies for absence apart from our chairman? Who hopefully will be fairly soon.
We have no apologies for non-attendance.
Okay, thank you. And do we have any notices from members of the public who would like to speak?
No notifications from the public either.
Okay. And do we have any declarations of interest from anybody?
We haven't received any declarations either, no.
Thank you. And then if we move on to item 4, which is the chairman's announcements, but I'm sure if he's got any, he'll make them when he joins us later. Okay.
Sorry to interrupt everybody, but could we sort of nominate Councillor Parker to be the chair whilst the chair is trying to get in, so that we can just have a vote on that, please?
I don't think you need to do that, do you? I think that because I'm the deputy chair, I can take over a meeting if the chairman can't come.
Okay, but it would be useful if everybody could just agree, because there at least we've got that noted, if that's okay.
Agreed.
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 Okay.
Agreed.
Brilliant, just so that it's noted down, that's all.
Okay, thank you. Right, so we'll move on then to item 5A, which are the minutes of the, I'm going to have to switch my light on because I put the light off. Now I can see. I might be a bit brighter on the top of my head now. Right, so items 5A, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of October. Are there any concerns or comments about that? Anything anybody would like to raise?
I would, please. On the public minutes section, some of the about the attendees. Councillor Lewis and Councillor Micklewright are recorded as Northamptonshire County Council when they should be employer representatives. Okay, so can you make those necessary changes, please?
Yeah. Changes also, yeah.
Is there any more comments?
With this district and borough, actually.
Yes, sorry, yes, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
It's happened before, actually.
But are there any more comments on the, if we go through the pages, so page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, 13. No comments, and we accept them as a true record. Yes. Now 5B is actually the pink papers, so shall we leave them to the end? Everybody happy to do that? So then in that case, we'll move on to item 6, which is actions for the meeting held on the 16th of October. Joe, do you want to comment on this? There's only one page.
Yeah, there's nothing on the action log.
Okay, so no comments on that one. So move on to item 7, which is the administration report. Again, that's you, Joe.
Thank you. Okay, just running through the report in order, starting with the key performance indicators of the pension service. Full details of that are on Appendix 1, which in my pack, and hopefully yours too, is page 22. As you'll see, for the first time in a very long time, we do have a number of red and amber key performance indicators. As you'll be aware, we managed to get through the whole of the pandemic with really good performance indicators, and the reason why these ones have slipped slightly is because of we had 3 days of system outage. 2 days of which were the network in Northamptonshire County Council's network, and the other day was our Altair system for processing pensions that was down, and that very quickly had an impact on how quickly we could turn around cases, making them fall out of the 5-day turnaround time. We are confident, and we have seen statistics for later months for November that things are back on track, so you shouldn't see a repeat of that. Well, assuming there are no further system outages that we have no control over. Back to the main report, the next section is employee and employer contributions, receipts and payment of those. That's Appendix 2. Page 8 and 24 of the pack. As you'll see from here, we're still, the average receipt of contributions paid on time is still averaging at 99.3%, which is really good considering, of course, the pandemic. And the schedule is being received at a rate of 98.5% of on time as an average as well. So that's all good to be concerned about there. There is a private appendix, which I don't intend to talk about unless anybody's got any questions, in which case, if we need to talk in detail, we may need to move into private sessions. So unless anyone's got any questions on that now.
Anybody, any questions?
Yes, please, Chair. Can I just ask, due to the organisation at the moment is a tier 1 to 3 that's going on, I believe there may be, okay, I guess, an increased number of managers asking for pension statements. Is the pensions team in a position to be able to react to those as quickly as it's needed to, please?
Joe, can you answer that?
Yes, that's quite an interesting and topical question at the time, because we do obviously have the exit payment issues that I would be talking about in a later item. But if we're talking about employers not affected by the cap, because there will be some in our scheme, then we're able to turn around those in normal time. But the exit, those employers affected by the exit cap, which is probably most of our employers, that there is a new process for that, and we haven't had too many cases of that yet, as far as I'm aware, but there certainly hasn't been a great rush of requests from an LGR perspective. And if Mark knows something, I don't on that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we administered 2 pension funds. We've not had any from that tier 1 to 3 yet, but in the other fund we ran through about 20. Within the last day or so. So there are exercises going on elsewhere. So we're up and running again on estimates. We had temporarily suspended processing estimates because we were having to update our strain factors because the existing ones were not appropriate for use with regards to the exit cap. We implemented those and refined our process for estimates. That's now live. We're very closely monitoring the volumes, obviously, because you're right to point out if if hundreds came through at once, it would be an issue. But we're not aware we're going to get that kind of volume for some time. We're obviously also re-engineering our retirements process, and it's that which is far more complex than the estimates, because the retirements process requires us to, for example, now have the ability to offer a deferred or a reduced pension. Or indeed an unreduced pension if they are under the cap. So it's a far more complex process.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'd like to carry on, Joe?
Thank you. So moving on to section 4 of the report, page 2 and 18. We have the breaches of the law section. Again, we only have 2 breaches, which is the unavoidable area of refund of contribution payments paid outside of the 5-year statutory period. Again, we're still waiting for regulation changes to come into effect that will stop that being a breach of the law. Section 5 of the report is the internal dispute resolution procedure cases that we've got ongoing at the moment. As you can see from the report, we've got 1 ongoing case, which is taking a bit longer because it's some kind of unprecedented and new to the industry as a whole. That's the seeking reinstatement / compensation for deferred benefits that were transferred out to an overseas pension scheme. And we have 1 case where somebody disputed their annual benefit statement and the effect on them because of that. That wasn't upheld at stage 1. And 2 more cases over leaf. I'll move on then to item 6.
Before we move on, Joe, has anybody got any questions on that? No? Okay, sorry, carry on, Joe.
Thank you. The next item is on the report, section 6. Page 319, is the overpayments of pension. We have 1 case to report here of a retired member that was inadvertently overpaid quite a large sum of money of £27,500. This was a result of the way this member's pension is displayed on our payroll system from previous migrations of payrolls that have occurred for the North Hampshire Pension Fund. And this was interpreted incorrectly, and some arrears were paid to him as we thought he was initially being underpaid, or her, should I say. And as a result of an audit later on, we realised that that was a mistake and they weren't due that amount of money. So we were able to write off a full part of that overpayment because it was representing a guaranteed minimum pension, which we have a policy that we will write off any overpayments with regards to that. That left us with a balance of £27,207 that we needed to recover from the scheme member. Following some correspondence with the member, details of which, as I've written in this report, are rather personal and sensitive, so they've not been written in detail in this report. The Section 151 officer agreed to write off the outstanding amount of £20,107 because the scheme member was able to repay a sum of £7,100. So, as you'll be aware from our overpayments of pension policy, the Section 151 officer does have the ability to write off that level of payment, and so did. So that's now been actioned, and the member has been informed of that action accordingly.
But Joe, with the move to the 2 unitaries in a matter of months now, how do we prevent that sort of thing from happening again in the future?
Well, our payroll systems won't be affected by that because we use Altair payroll, and with that we still in place by we moved to West Northampton Council. It was just a error in judgment really by the person administrating the pension on that occasion. They just looked at it and forgot to remember what the problems are with certain Northamptonshire pensions, how they're displayed on the system. So it really shouldn't happen again, and also it really shouldn't have happened at all in the first place. But this is not expected to be a consistent issue that's repeated. In fact, we've only found this one instance where that's happened.
Okay.
So it is really sort of a one-off event.
All right, thank you.
So,
Right.
Is there any criteria which the Section 151 officer uses to determine whether the write-off's appropriate?
we did write a very detailed report as to the member's situation and how the error had occurred and what the member was able to do in terms of being able to repay the 7,100. So there's some personal and sensitive issues involved there with the member's
I appreciate
health.
that. I don't need to know. I just question whether there's any sort of objective sort of process by which they assess that.
I'm not 100% sure that would be the Section 151 officer to answer, unless James or Mark could come here in on this bit.
It would just be a review on each individual on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I mean, if I can probably just say without betraying any confidence here, if things like affordability and any health issues, the personal circumstances, things like that are what's looked at, and those kind of things went into the report to set out the situation with regards to this individual.
I'm not arguing with the decision, I'm sure, but who actually reviews it and the report goes to whom?
In this case, we prepared it within. So if it had been obviously there are levels at which I am able to write off myself.
Yeah.
If it's not that, it obviously goes to the Section 151, but it would be either way, it would be prepared by the team. I actually had individual conversations with this particular individual as well in this case. So it was myself and the team who prepared the facts of the case, and they were put to the Section 151.
I mean, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't just one person. It's obviously
no, gosh, no.
Yeah. Okay, fine. Thank you.
Okay. No more questions? Okay, thank you very much, Joe. Can we move on then to item 8? And that's Mark.
Yes, thank you. The business plan update. I'll start by just apologising. The number in the report does seem to go out after 3.5.4. So as I go through it, if there's if it makes that difficult to actually spot what we are, I'll try to be as clear as I can. The first thing I'd like to say is a lot of the investment activities towards the back end of the list of activities are all progressing incredibly well. Even now, the asset pooling, where there were some delays, as Paul will go into a lot more detail in the private section of the meeting, the sub-fund launches have now recommenced, and indeed we quite a few have actually launched probably since we last spoke. So the investment activities, extremely pleased with the progress against those. So I'll just walk through a few of the activities I'd like to bring to your attention. 3.1.1, which is the first main activity, the business continuity plan. What we've done there is I have reprofiled this to reflect the fact that I think, as I've mentioned previously, we did do a rapid review of the business continuity plan in advance of the pandemic. We're looking at our main supplier, Keeler Haywood, and their arrangements. Indeed, they were most recently tested, as you've heard from the admin report, when the system went down. The switch, they have a backup server, and the switchover wasn't as smooth as they'd hoped, so they've actually put in some more contingency measures there, actually, which they've informed us of. But that's obviously one of our major potential weak points, our administration platform. But what we've reprofiled this to do is to recognise the fact that we're moving to a new entity come 1st of April, and actually some of our, so whatever we look at now could well change from the 1st of April anyway. So we just reprofiled it to take account of that. Cyber security, which is the next one, or cyber resilience, should I say. We've looked at those activities in detail. So we're undertaking a scorecard assessment. I think that's actually next week. And then we'll use our advisor, Aon, to help produce an action plan of anything that comes out of that scorecard assessment. So I think probably by the next time we talk through this business plan, there'll be quite a bit of movement in terms of exactly where we are, and even potentially we'll actually be able to bring that action plan to you so you can see what that is. I'll just mention 3.3.3, which is the multi-employer investment strategies. We're obviously discussing that later today, and there'll be a decision there as to whether you wish us to proceed with further activity around that. There's just two more that I'd like to talk through. The first one is 3.4.2. So we just turn to that. Okay, which is well, it says potential liability reduction exercises, but what in the first stage this is us writing to members who have left the scheme and seeing if they want to claim a refund where they haven't claimed a refund. So you'll see from the numbers now, we're starting to see how, what kind of volumes are responding, and we're getting cleared down. So we've written to about 20% of the 5,500 cases that we identified in scope, and having contacted them, just under 400 people so far have claimed a refund. So around 400 out of about 1,000 odd. So we're getting a fair take up on that. But what this is trying to do is to clear down these small amounts of pension from our system, see if the member wants to take a refund, or indeed if they want to transfer it elsewhere. And so the final one I'd like to bring your attention to before I open it up for questions is 3.4.1, the one above, which is the resolution of undecided leavers. And I think of all the activities, this is the one which we've struggled to make progress on during the pandemic. And we're pretty much static from where we are in terms of what the backlog was. We've revised the target, in fact, half the target, to see if we can get it down to around 7,500 cases in total. Just to remind you, that does include the business as usual. So it will never be zero. It will always be thousands, because there are always cases in progress. We're trying to get it to 5,000 and see how low we can get it. But the first step is to 7,500. But I think it's fair to say we'll probably struggle to hit that this year as well. I will only add one further thing around this, and that is what I'm looking at the moment is the number of cases that we're having to contact employers about repeatedly to get information. So I'm doing some further analysis around this at the moment, but we have thousands and thousands of those cases are where we have contacted the employer for information. We know they've left. We've perhaps got a data issue that we need to resolve, but we're struggling to get a bit of resolution on that. And I think probably if we can create efficiencies there, that's where we'll be able to eat into these a lot quicker without just throwing, more and more resource at it. But I'll pause there and see if there's any questions around the activities.
Anyone like to ask a question I'd like to ask one, Mark. I mean, do you have the same problem in Cambridgeshire with the numbers of?
Yes, yes. I mean, every fund in the country, I would imagine, has significant numbers of. Well, they always have every time we've spoken to them, significant numbers of outstanding leavers. I mean, it is. I mean, I think we probably haven't done ourselves any favours in the way we've represented it by giving you the total number, because that does, as I say, that does also include the ones. If we have 1,000 people due to the end of the school term, we might get 1,000 to 2,000 changes come through on our system in that 1 month. They would be included in that number. So clearly you will never be anywhere near zero. But do other funds struggle to get notification of leavers, get quality data? Absolutely. We're just obviously trying to find ways of making that a more efficient process. And obviously the biggest thing we've done is we've had this shift to everybody providing data monthly. And once an employer has given us 12 months data, we can then use that data to act as the leaver information. But it takes 12 months in order for that to build up.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Any questions for Mark?
And I've got
Yeah,
Chairman.
Richard, carry on.
Thank you. Yeah, on 312 about the cybercrime, it does actually say "and out in place," which I suppose is put in place, but that's a minor thing. Are you confident that sufficient, studies are being made? Because I mean, this is not where people can actually just take money out, but if they stop the system working, it's going to involve tens of thousands of people, isn't it? So are you confident that that work is sufficiently rigorous, to keep the thing secure?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's very often human actions which cause the breakdown in the security arrangements of any system. So obviously the first line of that is around the mandatory training that everyone has undertaken, which is the mandatory corporate training to prevent people doing things that would enable someone to get access. Obviously, with our suppliers, funnily enough, we obviously discussed the business plan at the Cambridgeshire Committee, and so there was very similar questions around that. So we use very large suppliers, very reputable suppliers like Hyman's, like Aon, and they're the only ones we really share any data with. So there's obviously data with those outside source providers as well, and through the contractual process and the framework process, that's tested. But I think we will be, one of the outcomes of the action plan, almost certainly I would say, would be us to identify a questionnaire that we can send to those suppliers to actually just look at that as well. So as well as looking at the internal security, we'll be looking at that security. We'll be looking at the transmission of data, although again, that's incredibly robust. So there's a portal we use of our scheme actuary whenever we exchange data to make sure there's no breakdown there. But as I say, I think the biggest risk is someone getting something, clicking on it, and that's opening up the system to all manner of attack.
Okay, thanks very much.
Is that
having just been done again this week through NatWest?
Yeah.
Any more questions, anybody?
I would just like to just mention a few words on the financials, which is after the activities, if there are no more questions on the activities. So sorry, I'm doing this electronically today, so I'll just scroll down to it. Right, okay. So, I mean, it's, there aren't really any major variations to the bits which are, if you like, directly under our control. I would just flag this management expenses. So obviously we've got so on the fund account, the first page of the financials, you've got the money coming in, you've got the benefits being paid out, and then below that you've got the management expenses. And the management expenses, there's a further breakdown on the next page, does include obviously the administration expenses. But the biggest variation here is just really a bit of a technicality, which is that in the past, all of the manager fees were paid out of, if you like, out of cash via invoice. But as we move into the asset pool, manager fees for those liquid assets are deducted from within each sub-fund. So we don't effectively anymore have to pay the money out. And what the significant variation there is that just that one of the managers moved across to pool a bit later than we expected. So therefore we had a bit more of an invoiced fee during this year. Of course, the fees are what they are. And so for transparency purposes, in the fund accounts, which we publish each year, there is a breakdown of the complete fees, including what's deducted at pool level as well. So I just thought I'd flag that significant variation.
Any questions, anybody? Concerns? No? Okay, Mark, is there anything else more you'd like to say?
No, that's it. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Right, shall we move on to item 9, which again is Joe?
Yeah, sorry, just before we move on, could we get the committee to agree to note the report, please?
I beg your pardon, yeah. Does everybody agree the report? Yeah, thank you. Apologise for that. Carry on, Joe.
Thank you. So report, the governance and compliance report has got one very important item in it, which I assume everybody has read the report in full, but what I plan to do is just do a bit of a brief overview of that, because things have moved on since the report was published. So if you don't mind, I've just got a few notes to read out, and then I can take any questions you may have on that, if that's okay. So at the last meeting, I informed you of the details of the public sector exit payment cap that restricts the exit package of scheme members of public sector pension schemes leaving employment with an exit package being restricted to now £95,000. The exit cap includes redundancy pay and pension strain. As you'll be aware, pension strain is the cost to an employer of paying an unreduced pension early when scheme members are made redundant from the age of 55 onwards. As I said to you last time, pension strain can be quite expensive. It can be up to the region of £300,000 sometimes, depending upon the age of the scheme member and the length of service and their distance away from the retirement age. But sometimes it can also be quite small if people are close to retirement. So feeding that into the £95,000 cap is obviously has a massive impact. So further to those reforms, MHCLG have also launched a consultation on further reforms on exit payments for those in local government employment. I detailed those in the report and also mentioned that last time. We have now responded to that consultation, and that's featured in Appendix 1 of this report. The further reforms to the MHCLG consultation are obviously haven't yet to come in. What they have also produced is some draft regulations that will enable the features of the public sector exit payment cap to work with the LGPS regulations. They've been drafted, and the consultation for those closes on the 18th of December. Sorry. We have found a few issues with the regulations, the draft regulations. They were, I think MHCLG will admit, they were put out in a rush, and they do need quite a bit of work to make them actually work well with the policy. So what's happened since the last meeting? The exit payment legislation came into force on the 4th of November 2020. So this means anybody retiring after the 4th of November would no longer be able to receive what they used to be able to receive, which was their full redundancy pay, pension strain of any, the benefits payable early to any value of pension strain, be it £1,000 or £300,000. That can no longer happen. So now their benefits, their exit package must be restricted to £95,000. However, the problem we have, and it's a very significant problem, is that the LGPS regulations have yet to be amended to allow a scheme member to not take immediate payment of their pension or even a fully or partially reduced pension on redundancy retirement if their exit package exceeds £95,000. So this is a big piece of legislation conflict that we as a administering authority need to work out how to handle. So MHCLG have provided a statement to say that administering authorities should pay a reduced pension, which is in conflict with the current LGPS regulations, and that employers should pay the cash sums due, i.e. the redundancy and any other payment linked to the termination of that employment up to the value of £95,000. The Scheme Advisory Board have also sought legal advice, and that advice reads as though administering authorities should offer scheme members who exceed the cap either a deferred benefit or a fully reduced pension, and for the employer to delay payment of any cash sums until the regulations align. We don't expect the regulations, the amended LGPS regulations, to be come into force until at least 2021, which I know isn't that far away now. We did think it might be January. Not so sure that will be the case now. But that doesn't impact people that are retiring from the period 4th of November onwards until these regulations are enforced. As a result, we have sought our own legal advice, which comes down the line of the Scheme Advisory Board advice. So that's the stance as administering authority that we're going to take. So with that, we have issued a communication to all our scheme employers setting out our position with regards to the conflict of the regulations, what we would like our approach to be. And we have asked that they also, as scheme employers, do not pay any cash sums whilst this time until the regulations align. We are fortunate in that we haven't actually had any live cases appear to us yet, so we haven't actually had to put this to the full test. What we need to be concerned about is challenge from scheme members, in that if they want to take the line of the LGPS regulations, they should be still expecting to be paid benefits in line with the LGPS regulations, which is a fully unreduced pension, because that's how the LGPS regulations read. But clearly that's not the policy intention going forward, and the fact that these two bits of regulations aren't aligned makes that very unclear as to the reason why we've also sought legal advice. So we are expecting members to challenge that, particularly in line with the position we're taking, where we won't pay a fully unreduced pension. So that has issues further down the line, that any complaints will have to go through the IDRP process, stage 1 and stage 2, and then they could go to the Pensions Ombudsman. With regards to the Pensions Ombudsman, they are fully aware of what's going on with all of this. And we are aware that a judicial review commencing the initial stages this month, where the details of that review will be considered, and the final points of that review will be judged to see if it can go through to a formal judicial review. We don't expect the judicial review to start until early 2021. So at that point, we still have no clarity as to what we should do whilst these cases are happening when the regulations haven't been aligned. But with regards to the Pensions Ombudsman, they may take the view that they won't take any action with regards to cases they receive whilst this judicial review is going on. They may wait the outcome of that. It depends on what the nature of individual complaints are and what the nature of the judicial review is. So that's the position we find ourselves in. It's a very difficult position. We haven't been in this position before, well, not in my lifetime of pensions. Hence the legal advice we've received, and so this is not unique to Northamptonshire Pension Fund. This is going on across the whole country. The LGA, Scheme Advisory Board, are working hard on this issue, and so that's how we find ourselves in. So happy to take any questions on that.
Yes.
Joe, you're aware that some employers aren't actually caught by this. For instance, the university has been advised that the university is not subject to this cap.
Yes, there's quite a few employers that in our scheme that are exempt from this. We're taking the view that employers need to make their own judgment as to whether they're affected by the cap, and we will be asking those questions whenever we get a redundancy request.
Yeah,
that's a very, very serious situation, isn't it? And I think that it's been rushed through. It reflects a lot of things that are happening at the moment, but yes, we need to see what happens with the judicial review if it should go forward in the near future. But anybody else got any questions or concerns they'd like to raise?
If I could just make a comment, please, Chair. I'm pleased to see in the response that we have highlighted that this is, who's affected. It could easily be, particularly our membership is female, low paid, and certainly I just excuse me for my comment, certainly the unions are looking to take any test cases. So anybody that comes to the pension scheme that's a Unison member, please send them our way, because we're very keen to get some test cases on their way as soon as possible. It just seems bizarre that the government's managed to upset everybody in one fell swoop, not just employers, scheme members, local authorities. They've unified everybody in their in the way they've done this.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else like to comment?
I was just going to raise the same issue that Andy's raised. I wanted to understand the position of the unions, and it's as I expected.
Well, I think everybody's thinking the same, aren't they, whether they're union or not? And it is a serious concern. But anybody else like to raise any points? No? Okay, so can we note the report, accept the report, and hopefully things will start moving on very, very soon. So,
Noted.
so if we move on to item 10, which is risk monitoring, and that's Michelle.
Thank you. So this is the standard report we bring to you on a biannual basis, just to keep you updated with the risks facing the fund. As you can see in section 2 of the report, there's 3 risks there that we've done a little bit of work on, just to ensure that it's as robust as it can be in terms of the wording. As we touched on earlier in terms of cybercrime, risk 13 there, as you can see, has been updated, just to demonstrate that that is an annual training requirement of officers, just to provide reassurance that we're obviously aware that attacks of cybercrime are changing and developing all the time, and we'll keep on top of those. Risk 19 there as well is in the table, which has been updated to reflect the modelling techniques that are used by the actuary to help us with decision making. And risk 21 it's just had a section added at the end of the risk just to support the conjunction with the fund actuary and specialist advisors. So all those 3 risks went to the local pension board meeting and in November, and they were discussed and agreed at that point to come to this meeting. Since then, following all the information coming out of the exit cap, we felt it was prudent to add an extra clarification on risk 14 as well. And as you'll see there in 2.2, we've added appropriate legal advice in there, just to strengthen that risk in terms of the mitigation. So with all of those risks, I'd say they are, every step is everything the pension fund already does in terms of if we had a complex case, we would be seeking legal advice anyway. What we've done is taken steps just to formalise and make sure every risk is documented and updated accordingly there. So under section 3, what we've done under that section is added a bit more comment on the short to medium term risks. So as you'll be aware from before, we don't necessarily put everything into the main list register because we want to keep it concise as possible, and we're looking at the long-term view. So what we've done under section 3 there is added the details around in the current risk of the pandemic, and also the administration pressures such as McLeod and the exit cap. Just add a bit of detail there, but obviously just covered that off in quite a bit of detail. So really the register's there for your review, and if there's any further recommendations you'd like to suggest, obviously we're more than happy to take those as well. Thank you.
We seem to have a little problem, Michelle, with first of all, your voice kept going up and down and disappearing, and your picture has completely disappeared now. So can you still hear us?
I can take any questions.
Okay. Any questions to Joe then, please, on this report?
Is that working?
I think better me reconnect, Michelle.
Joe, would you like to carry on until we can get Michelle back?
I think she'd finished the report, so I think it's just questions if anybody has any.
Right. Any questions, anybody? No?
Oh, can you hear me at all?
Oh, we can now, Michelle.
If I turn my camera off, can you hear me?
We can hear you, but in fact, Joe was going to take questions on your behalf, but there were no questions. So I'm just going to move that the members accept the report. Are you okay with that?
Yep, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, everybody accept the report and the recommendation?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thanks, Michelle.
I can hear you, but I can't.
Michelle,
Sorry.
can you disconnect and come back in?
Okay. All right, so we move on to item 11 then, please. And that's, once again, that's Joe, and that's the data improvement policy.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just getting to the page. So this really is just a review of our existing data improvement policy. It hadn't been reviewed for a little while, so all I've done here is bring it up to speed with the sections that needed updating with regards to our processes. So the data improvement policy changes are detailed in section 2.1 of the report. As you can see, I won't go into too much detail, but we've just updated it along the lines of what we are doing to improve our data quality. So just changed as the detail regards to the data audit that we carry out. I've detailed the increase in the scope of the National Insurance Database, which helps us to keep our data clean as well. The member tracing mortality screening in section 11.5. This is just been updated to reflect that we now have a supply of mortality screening and tracing services in place. And the next section was the proof of existence checks. That used to be carried out by Western Union, but as you know, we don't use them anymore for that purpose. So that policy has just been reflected to make that change. So that's all really I wanted to discuss from that report. If anyone's got any questions, happy to take them.
Okay. Questions, anybody? No? Okay. All right, in that case, does the committee accept the report and the recommendations?
Agreed.
Great.
Okay, thank you. So we move on to item 12, Employers Admission and Cessations Report. That's Corey.
Items on the report that I'd like to draw your attention to today. We have 5 admitted bodies coming to the scheme across 6 admission agreements. 4 of these are contractors, so they're just for the committee to note and approve the sealing of the agreements. But there is one body.
Mr. Chairman.
Sorry?
Can't hear you.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Can you hear me okay?
Can everybody hear Corey?
No.
Yes.
We've got 1 or 2 no's. So Corey, can you move your?
I'll try. How is that better? Sorry, it fills my face now, unfortunately.
We can either hear you or see you, one or the other.
That's
So yeah, if you carry on like that, I'm sure we can cope.
Yeah. Okay. So there's one body being admitted in this report that does need approval of the Pension Fund Committee. Northamptonshire Sport. They used to be hosted within Northamptonshire County Council, but funded externally. They've now taken themselves out of the council and spun off to become a charity in their own right, and have asked to maintain entry to the fund so their employees can stay members of the scheme. Northamptonshire County Council has agreed to keep the liability, so this will be a pass-through agreement. So when the body ceases, any assets and liabilities will revert back to Northamptonshire County Council or the successor bodies at that time. So there is no risk of entering this body into the fund, but you do need to approve this particular admission. Elsewhere on the report, we have 3 cessations to make you aware of. One of them, G4S, was a full admission, so we are asking the actuary to calculate what the cessation value is. The other 2 are either a pass-through agreement or NCC has agreed to take on the liabilities. Longtown Outdoor Learning Centre has had to come out of the fund. It can't afford to stay in the scheme as a result of the COVID pressures. Their income has dropped completely at the moment because it's linked to outdoor sessions for schools. So as part of the COVID relief fund, NCC have stepped in to pay that deficit on their behalf so the company can continue trading and offer those services in the future. Other than that, I don't have anything else to add to the report.
Okay, thank you. Anybody, any questions?
Chair, I just need to probably declare an interest in this. We've got Northamptonshire Sport. Obviously, their director is chairman of our board. Their chairman is on our board, and I have been providing them advice and guidance as part of their setting up of their new organisation. So I'll take advice of whether I need to exit the meeting or just not vote.
Well, I would suggest that you just don't vote. But what can we have some clarification on that?
I would agree, Chair. I would say not to vote.
Okay, thank you. Right, anybody else, any questions? So we need to vote then on Northamptonshire Sport. Is everybody happy with that? Yes?
Yes.
And the rest of the report, can we take that again as everybody accepting the report?
Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed.
Sorry, Chairman, just for the minutes, I need the committee to also approve the sealing of the admission agreements. Even though the admissions themselves are for noting, I can't have the agreement sealed unless you've approved that.
Okay, do we seal the agreement?
Yes.
Everybody happy?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Corey.
Thank you, Chairman.
Right, shall we move on then to item 13, which is the admission strategy? That's Corey again.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I brought the administration strategy in front of you following a review of that strategy. This is something that the fund puts in place to clarify the responsibilities of both the administering authority and the employers in the scheme. Sets out very clearly what's expected of each side of that relationship, and sets out the key performance indicators expected as well from all sides. I've mainly updated the report to reflect that we now have separate reports for each fund. It was a joint report, joint strategy, sorry, between the Cambridgeshire Fund and the Northamptonshire Fund. So I've removed all references to the Cambridgeshire Pension Fund and plural descriptions of the administration authority, sorry. I've also updated the report to reflect our current fund objectives. The objectives that were in this particular strategy were based on previous versions of those, so the wording was out of date. I've now reflected the new wording in the current objectives. There are also a couple of changes to the KPIs. In this, I'm just trying to find the page for you. On page, they start on page 117, Appendix A. You have the whole administering performance standards. This is about membership experience and measures the performance of both the employers and the fund. Then you have the employer performance on page 118, and this is where I want to draw your attention to some of the changes. I've simply reflected in there that we now collect data on a monthly basis as well as annual basis, and have set the KPIs for that. I've also included in here the charges that would be recovered for employers if they don't submit that data on a monthly basis as well. It only covered the annual provision of data previously. The rest of the changes are summarised in the report, and I'm happy to take any questions on those.
Right, members, any questions to Corey? No. Okay, in that case, then do we accept the report?
Yes.
Agreed.
Okay.
Everybody happy?
Mhm.
Okay, right, thank you very much. Right, we now need to move into the private section. Do you need to